Welcome to your community of fee-for-service financial advisors who are successfully building profitable firms that serve the next generation of clients. You'll learn from innovative advisors whose unique stories will inspire you to dream big and take action on your goals. Are you ready to live your great life and help clients live theirs? Then you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to welcome XYPN member Mike Troxell, founder of Modern Financial Planning, on the show today. Mike knew he wanted to be a financial planner, but his career started off on the tax side of the business as an accountant. After being steeped in tax education for 2.5 years, he made the move into financial planning and started working at an RIA. While he thought at that time he might want to start a firm one day, he loved that job and the people he was working with and thought he'd be there a long time. The stars unexpectedly aligned for him, however, and he decided unexpectedly to launch his own RIA. We talked about how he and his wife ultimately made that decision and made it work, as they had just had their first child and had their second just 12 months after he launched. Modern Financial Planning works with clients with RSUs or stock options, so many of his clients are in tech. And we talked about how he helps clients navigate the financial decisions that come with that industry. While he thought he would stay solo, he ended up bringing on another advisor and is in the process of onboarding a virtual assistant. We discussed that decision and how he's been focused on growing his business. This is a really fun interview that I'm certain you'll enjoy. Without further ado, here's my interview with Mike. As the host, you can probably tell that I really enjoy these conversations with XYPN members who are sharing their very real and inspiring stories. The real part is especially impactful for me. It's true that the rules of safety are written in blood, and we all gain from listening to those who have been there, learned from that. If you'd like to learn more from the experiences of others or to share your own, or maybe just need other sources of inspiration, go to xyplanningnetwork.com/events and register to join one of our monthly webinars where you can participate in these impactful conversations. Hey, Mike, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, Alan, thank you for having me. I remember when this podcast started, so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a bit of a walk down memory lane because you and I first connected in, you said September 2015. So pretty incredible we're sort of where we both were at that time and where we are today, which we're going to talk about your journey from then to now. So, to kick things off, can you, you started your career on, it sounds like on the accounting side of the business. So can you talk about, sort of life as an accountant and sort of your journey on that side?
Absolutely. And so rewinding a little bit further, coming out of college, so I studied finance and accounting. The accounting at the time was a little bit of an afterthought for myself. Wasn't that interested in it, didn't plan on going down that route. However, when I was looking to jump into financial services, like a lot of folks, we're talking to different firms, whether it's the Edward Jones or the Northwestern Mutuals or the Morgan Stanleys, right? And for me in particular, I spoke to a couple RIAs, but I spoke to a couple of those names as well, and started going down a little bit of a path with Morgan Stanley. And as you can imagine, and nothing against that firm or advisors there, but they want to know. You talk about like 6 degrees of separation. They want to know your first, second, third degree of LinkedIn connections and the net worth of everybody and the path to many millions. And you start to go down that path a little bit. And for me, that just wasn't something I was interested in. So as I started to get a taste of it going down that route, I thought, like maybe I can get into this industry from the tax side of things. So it was a little bit accidental and found a medium-sized tax business in San Francisco. My only experience at the time was volunteering to help, lower income folks do their tax returns.
Do like a VITA program.
Exactly. I think it was VITA or maybe Tax Aid or something like that. And so I ended up getting a job at a tax firm. I was there for 2.5 years. And in hindsight, it was great because we did mostly individual tax. Just speaking about the certification for a minute, the CPA, right? A lot of people think that it's just an individual tax certification, but it's a very small piece of it. There's a lot of different areas you could work as a CPA. But the firm I was at, we were, most of our work was individual taxes. If they were business owners, we did their business as well. But it wasn't long into my journey there that, again, I enjoyed it, but I wanted to do the full picture thing, right? Let's see. I think XY was, I forget when XY started, but yeah, what year did you guys start?
2014. So it would have been right around that time that we were chatting.
Yeah. So I think I was at the tax firm. So yeah, 2013, 14, 15, and you start to see, this pop up, or like the Sophia Berra type of stories. And it's like, you know what, I would like to do more full service, more proactive versus the, after the fact tax work. And that was my interest, even internally at the firm. If you had to rank the accountants, I was definitely towards the bottom of the rung on the accounting side of things. But on the more personal finance side, I was one of the more go-to folks. People would come to me with their questions about their 401k. They would not, the employees, they would not come to me with how to follow this accounting practice.
Fair enough. So you really did go into sort of the tax accounting with the intent of then getting into financial planning.
Yes. I remember one day specifically early on in the tax journey, sitting down in a cafe with a notebook, trying to, almost drawing it out, mapping it out. I did not have the timeline mapped out. It's not like I wanted to do this for X number of years. I was all into it when I was in it. And then, after a few years had passed, I realized that my interest was waning. Tax season, it can bury you a little bit, and so hey, this is the fun side of the business anyway.
Yeah, I love that because I talk to advisors that want to know, especially young advisors that are maybe still in college or just career changing into financial planning, and they want to know sort of the fastest path to becoming an advisor. And if you're willing to play the long game and willing to go through a couple of tax seasons, it really is incredible education, incredible learning to go and just sort of get inundated with the fire hose of individual tax preparation, because you learn so much about how to, really just about taxes, which are so integral to the lives of every client. Every client has to deal with taxes, and so obviously that has influenced you going forward. So it sounds like, going back, would you do it again in terms of working on the tax side, or would you have taken a different path, kind of, knowing now sort of where you're at?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, after I started in tax, it became, in hindsight, it was kind of a master plan. But at the time, again, I was applying for jobs with financial firms as well. So I'm sure if I got a job at an RIA, at an entry level job, I would guess I would have taken that. And so it would not have been the master plan playing out, but looking back 100%, and I would definitely recommend it, right? For a lot of folks that are trying to get into the industry, it's not just experience, it gives you a leg up. I was applying for an entry level job at an RIA, and then 2.5 years later, I end up working at that same RIA, but at, a couple levels higher, just because I had that tax background. And one interesting thing kind of worth highlighting is you can learn a lot of stuff on the tax side, but you can also learn a ton on the advisor side. I would, and who knows if this is true, right? But I would argue I learned more about taxes and tax planning once I crossed over to the other side, because you're just looking at it from a different lens. And on one lens, it's mostly after the fact, it's mostly reporting. It's, where do things go on what form, you're memorizing the forms and whatnot. But when you move over to the advisory side, the job is now to how much value can I add, right? The job is not how many billable hours can I get. So you're looking at, again, whether it's Roth conversions, you're looking at even asset location, even little stuff like what accounts are the fees coming out of. Those are just a couple examples of things that I never really considered because I was just so buried in the tax forms.
Sure. Yeah, and if that's the relationship that you have with the client, where it's just, all right, let's just get the taxes done versus tax planning, which, obviously a lot of accounting firms are trying to make more of a transition into a little bit more proactive planning. But then it does get hard. It's hard to just talk about taxes without also, talking about investments and talking about retirement planning, because it's all tied together, which is why we have a career. But I know when my wife and I were looking for our financial advisor, we looked for someone who either did taxes or at least had that deep tax knowledge in the firm, because again, like it's almost impossible to make big financial decisions without really understanding the tax ramifications. And I do think a lot of advisors probably underestimate the impact of taxes and probably are not always being the most tax efficient with their clients. But that being said, so was there a moment or anything in particular that happened that really made you sort of reevaluate? Okay, you're at the tax practice, things are going well. You want to do financial planning one of these days. Was there anything that happened that sort of pushed you over the edge in terms of, all right, now's the time?
Good question. And I don't know if there was one specific event, but I'd say maybe it just came up in conversations with some managers and whatnot, when you're talking about goal planning and vision for your career and whatnot. I think in those conversations, it came up where it's like, hey, this is a fine firm, but I'm not in love with what I'm doing. And I was upfront with them about what I was interested in, and they were fully supportive of it. They helped me out. They introduced me to a number of advisors. So they were definitely helpful. But I guess it was just having that conversation where maybe the truth came out a little bit, where before it was secretly doing work, researching, XY planning network, versus now it's like, hey, this is not what I want to do long term.
Fair. Did you get your CPA while you were with that accounting firm? Because that's a pretty tight window, but you do have the CPA license, correct?
Yes, I have the license, and I didn't get the license when I was at that firm, but I had passed all the tests and I had everything done. A number of years ago, I forget when, they bumped the education requirement up from, maybe it was 120 hours of credits to 150.
Yep.
So
kind of made it so you had to get a master's degree to get the CPA.
Exactly. Not quite. There's an online program at the Harvard of the South. It's called University of North Alabama that I crammed in, like, let's see, it was 3 credits. So I crammed in 7 classes, and maybe it cost like $400 a pop. So when I left the firm, I did not have my license, but within a couple of months, I was licensed. And you did ask about if there was one thing that led to it, and I know I answered that, but now I'm thinking, I'm being reminded of, there was one other thing that popped up. So we would have these Monday meetings, and usually the Monday meetings are about scheduling and billable hours, and sometimes there'd be knowledge sharing type of things. And there was a number of times where I brought up some more financial planning related topics, and I kind of got shut down for lack of interest. Maybe there were bad ideas. Maybe that was the right move, but I was trying to, going deep into these personal finance rabbit holes about, God knows what, 72T distributions or something I've never used in practice, bringing it up and getting not laughed at, but dismissed a little bit. So it's,
Sure.
The times I tried to bring the financial planning or even tax planning side into it. Again, I was low on the totem pole, so maybe that's why.
So you decided to make the transition into planning, which, like I said, was sort of the master plan in general, and ended up back at the firm that you had applied for an entry level position, which is really interesting. So talk to me about sort of the transition from accounting into the financial planning firm. Any particular surprises or unexpected challenges with that transition?
I'd say no unexpected challenges. I think so on the surprise side. I get one area where I've thought of is, there's a difference between playing like pickup basketball, for example, versus playing in a more structured league. And when it comes to personal finance, even though I had some traditional tax knowledge from being at the firm, a lot of my, again, financial planning, personal finance knowledge was more picked up on my own, right? And from the internet, or I don't know if I was listening to podcasts then, but books and blogs. So part of me, how much, I think I know a good amount, but how much do I really know? And I'm going to a really great firm with a lot of super sharp people, and this is in my mind, it was kind of the big leagues. And so going there, again, I'm not measuring myself against anyone. I just didn't want to be a fish out of water. And it turns out I was totally fine. I was totally fine. There was plenty of stuff I still had to learn, especially because it was a higher, ultra high net worth clientele who I did not work with before and I don't work with currently, but there's plenty of nuances there. But I guess one of the surprises was, okay, I know more than maybe, I thought I did.
Well, and you definitely knew more than you had, 2.5 years prior when you were applying for that entry level role, right? Like there was a reason you got a higher level job than you had been applying for, and it is because you were bringing in a more robust skill set.
Yep, absolutely. And as you pointed out, that's also when I discovered how related taxes are with financial planning and wealth management. Almost every topic, which you mentioned, and I've heard you mention before, almost every topic around financial planning, investing has a tax component. And so part of my role was, I'd say I was maybe like 80% on the advisory side, and then 20% of my role was an internal tax, a knowledge center. And so it was interesting to know how much traffic my desk would get with people coming by asking for, reminders on this, is it this or is it that? Or I'd have to go down some research rabbit holes and I really have to figure some stuff out. I spent too much time on Kitsis's blog where, before with AMT, I just plugged it into the software. Now I need to explain it to people that are going to be explaining it to their, $20 million clients. And now I need to know this like the back of my hand. I need to read every single sentence on the Kitsis blog. So it was just a different experience, but a great experience. And I can't say enough good things about that, my previous firm.
So in my career, I pretty much only ever worked with the millionaire next door type clients, and then next gen clients digging into student loans, that sort of thing. Once I started my own firm, so I never worked with the ultra high net worth clients. I mean, how do you ramp up your knowledge of working with those types of clients? Because mistakes can always be costly, but when you're working with clients with that much net worth, I mean, just small mistakes could have major financial consequences. So just how did you ramp up your knowledge of even how to provide value and how to work with those clients?
Good question. And I definitely want to be clear. I was not the lead advisor. So we had kind of a 3-person team on each client. There was the lead advisor, there was the second advisor, and then there was maybe like the operations person. And so my role was as that second advisor. So first and foremost, I did not have to make the final decisions. But I think a lot of things are the same, but there's definitely nuances, right? Whether it's like, on the investment side, a lot of folks like the private investments. I have to learn a lot of stuff there. On the charitable giving side, right? It's not just giving to this charity, which I saw for the most part on the tax side. Now it's donor advised funds or even, charitable remainder trusts and some more things like that. So I think there's definitely nuances. I don't know if there's that many. In my mind, and maybe this is not accurate, in my mind, the biggest difference was on the almost like the white glove side of things, where it's, when folks would come into the office, we needed to have a certain experience. The meeting rooms had certain views, the quality of the paper, stuff like that. Like everything is top notch, and it's, for folks that are interested in that.
Sure.
Which sometimes I'll bring up to clients or prospective clients when they're asking about working with our firm, and we strive for high value for sure, but we currently some of those other things are not important to us, right? Are we going to send you the best, most nicest gift basket in the world for your dog's 3rd birthday? Probably not.
Yeah, and I've never been that rich, but I would have to say sometimes it's just like I'll just take the lower fees, and you can keep your very personalized gift basket. That being said, so you were there 2.5 years, and ultimately decide to launch your own firm. So similar question to the tax for accounting question, but like, was there sort of a time or a moment when you knew it was time to become an entrepreneur and time to start your own firm?
Yeah, so this To me, right, it's my story. So it's a little bit of an interesting story, I think. So going into that firm, my long-term plan was to start my own firm. But to my surprise, I really loved working there. And there was a ton, and it was a good firm, good reputation, great people. I had a great network of folks there. And so starting my own firm was still in my mind, but it was definitely less on the forefront. We had our first child in 2017. And so that was definitely one turning point for me where, you know, one of my biggest goals in life is to be an involved and present dad. And I loved seeing my daughter, but for the most part, I would call myself, I was like a weekend dad where I would see her for 15 minutes in the morning and I'd go off, I'd start walking to the train and then I'd see her 15 minutes at night. There's someone else I know that to get a few minutes extra of dad time at night, they would run to the train and to and from work. And so I was so excited to become a dad. And then, within that first year, I'm not spending too much time with her. And, you know how it is where if you get home and it's near bedtime, you want to be the happy, excited dad that gets to see their child. But hey, they need to wind down. It's bedtime. So, you can't really be too excited. So I'd say that was becoming a father. That was a big one. And going into 2018, we were exploring, exploring the possibility, right? Just talking to my wife about it. We had a pretty low overhead at the time, and she was working part-time as a physical therapist. And I don't know what caused it, but we were poking around on some healthcare provider's website, and somehow, I don't recall, but somehow stumbled across a 3-day-a-week job because she didn't want to work full time, 3-day-a-week job, full benefits with enough pay to basically cover our living expenses. And seeing that was a major wrench in our current plan in my current job, where it's like, okay, you start doing the math. I've had this dream to start my own firm, and I realize we want to have more children. This might be the best opportunity for me to do it. We have low overhead. We only have one kid. She's not going to be able to work forever based on our priorities. And right now we have this opportunity. Maybe she could take this job, only work 3 days a week. We have enough overhead. So we have we have enough income to cover our overhead. So we have savings plus 1 year of income basically until our next child arrives. So we talked to some folks at that company and they said, oh yeah, it's a super long and super difficult hiring process. Like just submit your application and who knows how long it's going to take. And so without really thinking about it, she just submitted her application and that was that. We didn't really think much of it. And obviously, as the story goes, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 days later, they want to set up an interview. So she sets up an interview and again, long story short, she gets a job offer not soon after. And we're like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. And I'll tell some folks it's a lot easier to talk about skydiving than it is to jump out of an airplane, right? And
it's so true.
And that's how I feel about this journey. Again, years ago, it's easy to read entrepreneurship blogs. It's easy to listen to podcasts and starting, startups and this and that. Like that's all easy for sure. But when the time comes, it's very, very, very difficult. So she had the job offer in hand. Again, we wrestled with this because as much as I wanted to spend more time with my daughter, I did like my current setup, and hey, I was treated well. I feel like I was paid fairly, and I didn't want to leave at that point. I did not want to leave at that point. So again, my hand was a bit forced, and I did realize if I don't do this now, we want to have more kids. Right now, we have 4 kids. So would I do this now with 4 kids and go to zero income? Heck no. So I was right that was the time, and so that's when I jumped, and I felt at the time like this could be one of the dumbest things I've ever done. So, and it's worked out so far.
So because she had that job offer in hand, but it did require her to work 3 days a week, did you need to start your own firm also just so you had the flexibility around taking care of the kiddo during that time? Was that sort of why those two things were tied together?
Good question. So she would not have taken that job the only reason she took it is because I was going to start my own firm. So she applied for it because of, it seemed like it was just an empty thing. Like, oh, I'm just going to throw my application to this big company. And so maybe we were going to have that conversation, 6 months down the road, right? We were advised by insiders at the company, it would take a long time. So if I stayed at my previous job, she would have stayed at her current setup, working part-time. She did not want that 3-day-a-week job. It did involve Sundays as well. So it was like a Sunday, Monday, Wednesday thing, which is not ideal for the family because our weekend gets cut in half. But she was willing to do it for 1 year. And that's what she did. We had our second child a year later. And then she stepped away from employment.
So she did that for a year. At that 1 year mark, were you making enough from the business to be able to cover household expenses at that point? Or was there a little bit of a gap living on savings between sort of when she backed out or backed down from her current, that role with your second kid and then sort of the business supporting the family?
Good question. I'd say it was pretty much a perfect transition. I think around that time that she left that job, so she maybe had 5 more months or a few months of maternity leave pay. In California, it's paid. So I think somewhere in that range, my forward-looking income reached the survivability.
That's really incredible. Congratulations on that. Because just and I know we're talking about it like it was easy. And there was nothing easy about probably that year with her working, 3 days a week and a 1-year-old and pregnant with your second kid and you starting a business. So how did you, I guess, keep the wheels on the bus during that time? Because that sounds like an incredibly stressful year when you sort of layer it in like that.
Good question, and I will answer it. But I do want to applaud you for a minute, Alan. I mean, of all the podcasts I listen to, I feel like you do a good job of shining a light on spouses and family situation. And I don't know what the line is, but like behind every entrepreneur, there's a supportive spouse with benefits.
Yep, absolutely.
So I do appreciate you bringing it up. But no, it was a crazy time for sure. So she was, our child. She was in part-time childcare. So of the 5 work days, I was on dad duty for one of those days, and that was, again, this was my startup phase. So getting going with XY and building the website and whatnot. So it was certainly a stressful time. It was a 7 days a week doing some sort of work, whether it's you're trying to do anything you can to grow the business and get clients. So it was a highly stressful time, coupled with the fact that her dad, my father-in-law during that time was diagnosed with lung cancer, terminal lung cancer. And given my wife's healthcare expertise, she was the main advocate, I guess, healthcare advocate. So it was, pregnant, having our second kid, dealing with that. She's working 3 days a week, driving to appointments left and right. And I'm working, at least some hours, 7 days a week, trying to get this thing going. Yeah, it was a crazy time. And then my son was born, and it seemed like with him, we were in the ER every other month for the first year with dealing with different allergies and whatnot. So it was not easy at all. My wife is a total warrior and unbelievable and 20 times tougher than I am and unbelievably supportive. It was a crazy time. And I think on the financial side of things, being able to support the family, it had more to do at that point with low living expenses than it's like, oh, the business is booming and this and that. That's something we've always been pretty good at, is keeping our monthly expense pretty low.
I appreciate you sharing that. And you're absolutely right that so many times those of us who have found success has been because of a supportive partner who is there with an income and benefits and that sort of thing. I'm not envious of those who truly go it alone and are the breadwinner of the family or the sole income, because it's a tough journey with support. It's a tough journey with another income. But it's never an easy journey. And I do want to call that out for folks, that just to be, real about this journey, that it's easy to look back on it now and say like, oh, like it worked out perfectly and everything's great. And yeah, but the day-to-day grind is a lot. So, if I go to your website today, the homepage says financial planning for folks with stock options and RSUs. First off, I don't see the word folks on very many people's websites. And as a Southern boy, I appreciate that. Did you start with that niche focus or did that develop over time?
I did not. And I started focusing a little less on that list that you usually state: individuals, women, businesses, trusts,
Right.
Living, not living, right? So I think the initial version of the website was tech folks. There's folks again. I guess I need to get that out of my vocabulary.
No, I like it.
Uh, tech folks, medical professionals, only because, hey, my wife's working in healthcare. So that could be a decent in. And there might have been a third one, honestly. I think there was a third one, but young families. So young families, tech professionals, and healthcare workers. So I don't think for the most part, I don't work with any or many people in healthcare. Maybe a spouse, right, of a tech employee. But it was, I think, focusing in on that niche. It had a lot to do with location and then interest. The more I see it, the more I understand it, the more I enjoy it. Right? It's like, hey, a lot of people around me are in tech. It's a very tax heavy, right? Which is great, but it's also very big on like the psychology and behavioral finance, which is my favorite part about finance. So it seems like whenever I'm talking to a client or prospective client, 95% of the time, that stuff's coming up. We're talking taxes, tax planning, whether it's an RSU withholding or AMT planning. And then we're talking about the psychology component of dealing with a large position of a company stock where, it's not easy. The stock has 10x and now it's 70% of my net worth. How do we talk about this? How do we unwind it? How do we think about it? Again, there's a tax component there, but there's also the, we're dealing with the internal Slack channels where everyone is, telling you that it's going to go to the moon, right? So I guess to answer your question, no, it was not always my niche, but it wasn't too long into it where it became the case.
Very cool. And yeah, to your point, you think about things like RSUs and ISOs and, non-qualified, like it's so complex. There's so much there to know, but then also there is this behavioral side that, trying to convince a client to sell 10% of their option, or, exercise 10% of their options or 10% of the stock that they got in their ESPP, whatever the thing is, like sometimes it feels impossible from what I understand of the work that you're doing with these clients. And so it does seem like there is a heavy behavioral finance component of really understanding, I'm assuming helping them really get clear on their goals and matching their finances to their goals, not just how do we make it the most money as possible here.
Yep. And you do realize, or do you understand why Richard Thaler won the Nobel Peace Prize on this, where I believe it was around like defaults, and I believe his book was called Nudge, where I think the general idea, again, I haven't read it, I think the general idea of his thesis was, should we spend all this time and money on educating our employees on the benefits of a 401k, or should we just default them into it 2 or 3% and then they can opt out, right?
Yep.
And so that's really how RSUs work, right? There, instead of the employees by having the option to opt into buying company stock, where maybe they do with an ESPP, RSUs, they are defaulted into it. You're getting a cash bonus and we're basically automatically buying stock. And so that default is very, very strong. And it's, you see how strong it is talking to clients about it. And, no one likes, and again, obviously you talk about it in a respectful way. And I think this is where there's the art and science of financial planning, where if you're only looking at the books, or maybe I was before, you might think, oh, anything more than a 5% position in a single stock is a bad idea. Or, hey, maybe even holding even one share of a single stock is a bad idea, right? But by some measures, and some folks hold that opinion, but then you got to get into it more on the art side. You talk to hundreds or thousands of these folks and you realize, like, hey, I mean, they live and breathe this stuff. They really, really believe in these companies, and we're rooting for them, and we're rooting for the companies too. And we're trying to educate them, and they are going to make the decisions that's best for them. And sometimes that's holding 10% of a position. Sometimes it's 30, 50, 60, sometimes it's very large percentages. So it's interesting over time where, become, I don't know, immune to it. Or I just understand it a bit more. And it's like, hey, if they know the pros and cons, that they know the upsides, the downsides, then that's all we can do. We can support them and educate and root for them.
Yeah, I always found it interesting that really the financial planning program, we learn how to be financial planners. We learn a lot about diversification, right? Which really diversification is risk mitigation. It's trying to reduce the risk of being overly invested in one stock. And I totally get why that is. But many times, maybe most of the time, the path to wealth is not diversification. It is being overly leveraged into a single area and it doing well. And so that's a hard conversation around yes, like we want to reduce your stake so that we can diversify and reduce the risk. But in doing so, we're also cutting the upside. And, those clients can do the math. When they sold off 90% of their shares, they kept 10% and it did really well. And they're looking at like, well, I got $1 million, could have had 10 million if you hadn't made me sell. And it is an important thing to do, but it's also it's such an individualized conversation. To your point, I feel like when I learned how to do financial planning, it was always about get rid of all the shares, of a small business stock or whatever, and just diversify. But that's not always, I would say, that's not always the right answer, and that's, I guess, probably hard to unlearn from some of the education that we've had.
Certainly, it's challenging, and it really does point to the value of personalized advice. Like, I know I referenced Slack channels earlier, and that's a real thing inside of these companies. And this person said this or this person said that, and they're highly intelligent folks for sure, and I'll never discount that. But we don't know the personal situations, right? This person saying, hold, but maybe that person has $5 million in the bank. Right. Versus this person needs to support their aging parents. So and like you mentioned, helping them align this with their goals and their values. Sometimes it's less about the stock and what it's going to do, more so about, your specific situation. And, I'll tell clients like, hey, if you had 10 million bucks in the bank, I agree. I'm with you. Let it ride. Who cares? It's a drop in the bucket. But when it becomes a really meaningful piece of the pie, it's a challenging conversation, and it's an art. And I think I'm a lot better at it now than I was 5 years ago. And I'm sure in 5 years I'll be a lot better at it than I am compared to right now.
So now with your current structure, you have an RIA and a separate tax business. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so what sort of led you down the path of having those two entities, and how are they working together, I guess, with your clients to provide that comprehensive service?
Yep. Good question. And I guess the first is they're separate, and I don't fully know why. I know there has been a lot of conversation with advisors I've seen within XY and compliance conversation, and the gist of what I've gathered is, hey, it can be cleaner to have it separated out. So that's how we have it structured. Initially, we did not offer tax prep. Initially, I was trying to steer away from that, actually, because I had my CPA, I had my tax background in my last firm. Sometimes I was referred to internally, as the tax guy, right? And so part of me wanted to, I don't know about shedding that identity, but more so, I wanted to be folks' financial planner. I didn't want to be their tax person. Also, on the COI side, I spent a lot of time trying to build relationships with COIs. So I didn't want to offer tax prep. I didn't want that, not that they would view it maybe negatively, maybe they would, but I just didn't want it to even be in the equation. So initially there was technically a sole proprietor tax firm, but I would do, basically friends and family, maybe like five people's returns. But it wasn't until the years have gone on where A, a lot of folks needed it. B, a lot of folks that needed it, they were not necessarily good clients for the firms that I would refer them to, right? a lot of CPA firms, a lot of the ones I know and respect. There's many out there, and most of them I don't know. But the main ones I would refer folks to, they don't want the individual return from someone who rents as a W-2 with like maybe one little funky thing, like they exercised ISOs, right? They want the big stuff. They want the real estate. They want the businesses. So as time has went on, it's like, okay, I have these clients. They need tax help. I could help them. And this firm doesn't want them, right? So it became kind of a perfect match. It's like, well, we can fill that void and we can not step on the toes of these firms because they don't want these folks. So they could either be homeless or they could go to H&R Block or some other CPA or EA or other tax preparer that I don't know and I haven't vetted. So we opened up this second entity and we've been offering it. So we're not doing returns for all clients. It's totally optional. The way the split is currently, maybe 50% of our clients are utilizing us for tax prep, and there's a separate fee there. It's mostly cost recovery. Honestly, it's not like a revenue driver. It's just it's below market. Let's just say that. So 50% of the clients roughly we do their return. Maybe 25% want to still do it themselves. And we're fully supportive of that. And if they have questions or if they even want to do a quick screen share for us to review, we're happy to do it, right? And then maybe 25% have outside accounting relationships that they've had previously. And again, we want to fully respect that. So we're not trying to grow the tax business. We don't have, there's no website or advertising or anything like that. It's kind of just a basket to catch these situations where we have all the information anyway.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you're uniquely positioned that, you were probably there and helped make help them make the decision around, exercising the ISO. And so then you can know that happened and put it into the tax return. I'm actually amazed at how often clients and their advisors didn't know something happened. Like we see this with XY Tax Solutions, where the stories we hear of oh yeah, client sells real estate for a big gain and never told their advisor, or their advisor just didn't even think about the tax consequences. Now all of a sudden, big gains you got to think about. But when you're doing both, it really can help to, just to be able to make the preparation process a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry. Just one comment there. Absolutely. And being on both sides, on the tax side previously, and then the moving over to the advisory side, that's when I realized there are a lot of things that fall through the cracks. There's a lot. There's so much overlap, and both sides are not always talking. And I never want to talk negatively on tax folks at all. I think their business model is difficult, which can affect the service. It's great people, talented people for sure, but it is hard if you have 600 tax returns on your desk, right? It is hard to give everything and everybody the attention they deserve. And also it's hard, it's hard to bill for everything, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff doesn't get done because hey, our rate for our partners are $300 an hour. So every little thing like this, we're just not going to do because it's inefficient and we can't charge the client for that. So a lot of stuff does fall through the cracks. And, I don't know what the best, model is for that, but I think the current totally separate does not seem ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me about your team structure, because you have team members now, and so you've decided to start growing the firm. So who all is or are you, I guess, have you hired or are you working with in terms of full-time, part-time, W-2 contractor, that sort of thing?
Yep, good question. So like a lot of folks within XY, I imagine they start solo and maybe they want to stay solo. And that's how I was before until I had one conversation with an advisor, and it kind of changed my mind about things, where he had one person on his team. And I asked him, I said, hey, what's the plan for the firm? Is it, just you two? Are you going to grow? And he said, well, I don't know. I really, really like working with this person. And if I find someone else down the road like this person, I would love to work with them. And if I never find someone else like this person, I'm happy with just the two of us. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Where and it makes sense. It didn't make sense to me to be so committed to the solo route. And it's like, hey, if the right person comes along and it's a perfect fit, then maybe we can make something work. And so, and that's kind of what happened a couple of years ago. Somebody who I'm close with, I'm friends with, we used to work together in the tax world at the tax firm. We stayed in touch. Our spouses know each other and whatnot. She was moving from the CPA side, and she had interest in the financial planning side of things, and had conversations with different firms, including myself. She went and studied and got her CFP, and so it's someone I know, like, and trust, who was interested in helping me out in the background and looking into the hood. And so we kind of started dabbling, showing her some things, letting her shadow me on a couple things, and maybe 6 or 7 months into that, we realized that she was very talented, and B, I didn't really have the time or the ability to put her through this perfect training program, and she was well advanced beyond that. She knows way more than me on the tax side of things. And so it's like, okay, we're just going to start feeding you some clients, essentially, where we're going to work on them together, and you can be the lead person, and I will be in the background, and I will play as much of a support role as you need. Basically your assistant / operations person, co-advisor, you name it. And so the first few relationships started out like that. And then, she's been off and running. So I have a lot more clients right now, given that, I started years earlier, but, a good portion of the new clients, over 50% for sure, she is handling. She does a little more on the tax side of things as well, and she contributes in other ways. So it's been a good setup. And then 2 days ago, we finalized hiring a VA. Not much to report there, but there's been some mega benefits already that I've realized, and I'm happy to chat about if you're curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've hired an internal VA to the team?
Yes. Within 1 day, I was asking myself this question: if I had to double the business, what's the first thing I would do? And that's what I realized. I would need to hire an assistant to take some of this little stuff off my plate. And then like that day or the next day, I think it was in one of the XY forums, someone posted, hey, if anyone needs a VA, we highly recommend this person. She's been great. And we ended up deciding we're going to hire like a full-time in-person, in-office, office manager type person. And I'm like, interesting. I just thought about this today, and now this is popping up. So I ended up reaching out to them. We had a number of conversations, and we officially started things 2 days ago at the date of this recording. And previously, process, operations, whatnot, was not my thing, for sure. I mean, I believe you've referenced that book, The E-Myth, in the past, and I've certainly read it, and I'm guilty. I think I like baking cakes, and I'm a good baker, but the other stuff, it's a challenge. But even just deciding to bring on an assistant it's been a forcing mechanism. It's forced me to spend a ton of time thinking about processes, operations, workflows. She's not a miracle worker. I need to give her stuff to do. And, she doesn't just come in and clean things up. And so I've spent a lot of time the last few weeks cleaning things up, and just my mind is blown. My eyes are open, and, and if she never completes one task for me, it's been way, way worth it. And I owe her a bunch of money. So I am very excited, and more excited than I have been, about this next chapter.
Yeah, it's a great point that we underestimate the value of just bringing someone in that type of role to force us to really evaluate, do we need to be doing these things? How do I do them? Like documenting them, getting it out of your head, because there's an opportunity probably to stop doing some things, to hand off doing others, to make some things more efficient, leveraging technology when possible. It sounds like you're really seeing the benefits of that and haven't even really ramped up yet from a hours perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And when to your credit, I don't know if you do it anymore, but I know in the early days you would joke about a drinking game, like a niche drinking game.
Yep.
Every time you said niche, and it's just so funny that I'm now for sure on team niche, and there's so many different layers to it, right? I think sometimes we hear the word niche and we immediately think of like marketing. right? If someone comes to your website and they see folks with equity comp, that is good. For sure, it is good. But there's so many different layers to it. And one of the many layers is on the operations and process side, where it's like, hey, if all of our clients or 90% of our clients are in a similar bucket and we're doing similar things for them, well, it makes it a lot easier to start structuring things. And again, and I've been realizing that, but that's now my epiphany as I'm going through some workflows and processes and stuff. It's like, wow, this is going to just completely change things.
Yeah, it's also a great point. It does make it a lot easier to sort of train, and bring in new team members when it's a little bit more consistent work, consistent processes, that sort of thing. You mentioned earlier that you were faced with the decision of, if I want to double this business, how am I going to do that? Is that the goal? Is the goal to double the business in terms of revenue, profitability, client count, or was that more of just sort of a thought experiment?
Good question. Yeah, that is not the goal, and it's just a thought experiment. And I've always tried to be careful about growth, maybe sometimes too careful, because I didn't want to just run full speed ahead, sign every client that was willing and could fog a mirror, because I didn't want to get to a point where I'm so overworked. I have 87 clients and I don't know what to do. So no, it's not the goal. It was a thought experiment. And sometimes people ask you, what's your client capacity, right? And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, and for a number of reasons. But I especially don't, because I don't know what this would do to me. I don't know what it's going to free up. So I guess I'm open-minded. Maybe it's going to free up a lot more client load for myself. Maybe it's going to free up a lot more marketing time, where we can bring in a lot more clients. And then our other advisor, Yulia, she would have more clients she's managing. Maybe there's other advisors down the road. So I guess I don't know. And I've been almost scared to tackle this problem in the past, and now I'm just excited to tackle it. And so we'll see where it goes. I'm not. Growth is interesting. I'm not married to it. Again, there are 4 kids at home. So there's a balance, but I don't want to use that as an excuse to not experiment and try to improve the business.
What do you think it will take for you to make that decision? Like what can you sort of envision, whether it be information or experiencing or the right person coming along or whatnot? Like, can you imagine sort of what it will take for you to make that decision? Because that's a big decision that you can put off as long as you choose. So just sort of curious if you can envision what ultimately will lead to it.
When you say a decision to bring on
to grow, or you said you could see growth. You don't have to. You have a lot of optionality there. So sort of that decision at some point.
Yep. Well, I think the plan is for this to free up some of my time, right? And I'm definitely open to take on more clients, and I will, but I would like to spend a little more time on the marketing side of things, right? I like that stuff. I like writing. We're in the last year, in 2022, was our first real year getting decent website traffic. And I don't even know what decent is, but just looking at our metrics, it was basically non-existent, as it should have been. And then 2022, we got a lot more inbound from the web. And again, I like writing. I dabbled with a podcast in the past, and I'm restarting one right around now, so it'll definitely be up and running by the time this airs. So yeah, I guess I don't know. Open-minded. I'll take on more clients. I want to do more marketing stuff, and we'll see where it goes. And if there's other advisors out there that fit are the ideal person, and we get along great, and it's love at first sight type of thing, then maybe the team will expand. But I'm not married to a specific vision. And I think in the past maybe I was. I want to stay solo. I want to stay small. I'm not married to a specific vision. I believe I do not want a large firm. I don't want 30 employees and a million meetings and whatnot. I think sometimes at firms that are larger, and speaking from experience, like how much time are you really doing client work, and how much time are you doing, I don't know, other stuff? And that was a shift, right? It's like moving over to starting my own firm. The number of hours I was working was maybe similar, maybe a little less, but I would argue I was actually working 80 or 90% of that time versus I don't know, getting interrupted and having meetings left and right. Internally, it can kill productivity.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, listen, as we're coming to the end of our time together, I'll ask you the final question. And that's, if there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, one thing that you've learned that you wish you had known then, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've heard it a number of times, and it's a challenging one. And I think I'd go back to a little bit of what I said around mindset, and maybe I tell myself, be wary of the stories you tell yourself. Right? I want to like a stat you've mentioned in the past, where 100% of advisors within XY raise their fees in the first year, type of thing. We might go into it thinking we want to do this, and we want to be solo, and we want to only charge this little bit and only work with these clients. And I'm not in it for the money, and which is all good and could be true, but maybe those are the wrong stories to tell. And for me, I think it was the wrong story to tell myself. Again, being open-minded about growth, right? If I were to grow, if I were to improve the business, what would I do? Hiring an assistant, right? That will help me improve the business, right? Even if we don't grow at all, there's less stuff I'm doing and there's more time I can spend working with clients, right? Adding value to clients, cleaning up stuff. And so to me, that's not maybe the growth story or the not growing story was getting in the way of me adding value to clients. Similar on the fee side of things. I've heard some advisors mentioned, one of the best things we can do for our clients is run a very profitable business, right? Because if we're adding value, we want to stay in business. And if we're not profitable, we're not going to stay in business, and we cannot help them. The more, I'm not driven by money at all. And I've told myself that story a million times. But if there was a little more, would I invest a little more in certain software? Would I invest a little more into personal development, which would then flow to my clients? For sure, I would. So I think in the past, there's some stories I've told myself, and they could be good or they could be altruistic. And I think it's important to ask myself, right, where are these coming from? Why am I telling myself this? And are there other angles to it?
Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, share your story, which is one I think is going to resonate with a lot of listeners. So I appreciate that and wish you the best in terms of success over these coming years, because you're building a really great business that's supporting your great life, and I commend you for that. So thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing you at the XY conference this year.
Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private Facebook group for fee-for-service advisors. It's the community you've been looking for that's there to provide support no matter where you are in your journey. Best of all, it's free. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP.
Thanks for listening to XYPN Radio. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to leave a review that will help grow the movement of fee-for-service advisors, serving next-gen clients and building the firms of their dreams. That's all for today's episode. Until next time.